Now, you got to admit, that's kind of harsh. You got to put Jesus before your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, even your dog. Jesus wants to be first, which makes us accept the challenge or reject the challenge. I guess we got to ask ourselves, are we with God or against God? When he offers us stakes like that, we can see people saying, oh, I don't follow Jesus. He asks too much of me. And he makes it clear he does ask a lot of all of us. He opens up that section to the people who are following him. Now, when you listen to Luke's gospel is formulated that Jesus is always traveling. He's walking. And to read the whole gospel, he's traveling toward the cross. So that's the purpose. Luke weaves that in and out of all of Jesus' sayings while he's on this journey toward the cross. And now you could just see it in the distance. Maybe if you were there, maybe we could see the Romans having already hung up some people on the crosses. And you can just say, Jesus saying, see that cross? Unless each one of you takes your own cross and follows me, you're not worthy of me. So, in other words, following Jesus follows him to the cross. Now we got to understand what the cross is. And he puts it in perspective. He wants us completely. In the Old Testament, they used to call God a jealous God. In the New Testament, you can see why that applies. He wants us completely. Now, at times, it seems that society absolutely says no to Jesus. We're not going to follow you. We're not going to accept the cross. We're not going to accept these challenges. No, absolutely not. And of course, we have to decide, we as practicing Christians have to decide, are we with Jesus or against him? Is he our enemy or is he our brother, calling us to live a really full life? And as we look through the scriptures today, the book of Sirach, traditionally attributed to Solomon, is a book of understanding just where we are. We're part of God's creation. We have access to God, but don't think you could ever understand him completely. Whoever knew the counsel of God, or even have his wisdom, or whoever has received his spirit from on high, is the words of Sirach. So Sirach is giving us a perspective to look at the gospel, you might say, by saying, don't even try to understand God. Don't even try to get into his mind. He's far above us. And if you think, well, why is this happening? How often do we hear that? If God's such a good God, why does he allow children to die? Why does God allow war? Why does God allow terrorism? So we want to figure out, okay, God is in charge of all that, so we want to get into the mind of God. Ain't happening, folks. The book of Sirach and the scriptures completely tell us you can't figure out God. Who you can figure out is God's word, Jesus. But you can't figure out God. He knows the whole picture. So he reads the minds and hearts of evil people, of evil leaders, of selfish leaders. He reads their minds and hearts and leaves it to them, not because he's in a battle with them, but because he gave us free will to do what they need to do, what they want to do selfishly so often. And we as Catholics, we're not against him. We're with him. So we can't look at those who are desecrating God or his holy word and say, see, they're in charge, they're winning. It's not a win or lose. It's a relationship. And Jesus says, yeah, I want you totally. I don't want you halfway. You have to be willing to give up your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your dog, your cat to follow me. Now, Exaggeration? Yes, of course, exaggeration. But see what he wants? He wants us to know him. He wants us to connect with him and be in our lives. And he gives these examples. You can't just wake up in the morning and say, okay, today I'll follow God. No, no, you have to plan on following God. And he gives us examples of if a tower was being built, the builder would have to make sure he has enough resources to build the whole tower. Or, in human phrase, people would laugh at him and he'd be embarrassed. Or a soldier marching into war. He's not going to march into war if he has 10,000 and fighting 20,000. No, he uses common sense and would send a legate ahead of him to work out terms of peace, like someone we all know is trying to do with Ukraine and Russia. You see, those images that Jesus gave 22 centuries ago, 20 centuries ago, still prevail and are appropriate. Fighting for war, working out terms of peace, rather than go in as the enemy and another bomb. And it's tough. It's tough. And Jesus wants us to know him that well, to figure out how we, not him, you can't figure out Jesus, because it's pretty clear what he wants of us. He wants us totally. But how can I follow him? How can I make him a priority in my life? He wants us totally. Interesting, the second letter, the reading, the epistle, is usually not related to the first reading or the gospel, but it usually has a little spark of faith and encouragement. And today's reading is very interesting because Onesimus, the guy who's being mentioned by Paul, as he writes to Philemon. Philemon is a slave owner. Signs of the times, not approved today, of course, we understand. We don't want to get into that, but he does remind us of the dignity of all people. So he says he meets this Onesimus, who was probably a slave of Philemon and probably stole something because he's in jail. He's in jail with Paul. And what is Paul? Paul sees like a person as a challenge to know and a challenge to educate Jesus about. And he talks to Philemon, he talks to Onesimus, and he converts Onesimus. Onesimus becomes a Christian. He was probably no faith or a pagan before that. And he baptizes him. And Paul and Onesimus develop such a relationship that he calls him his son. My brother, my son. When you take him back, realize, now here's the kicker, you're not taking him back as a slave, you're taking him back as your brother. Now that's certainly ahead of its times, you might say. A thought that the slave is no longer a slave, he's your brother. That takes a lot of change of mind. That changes a lot in history from that point on to the end of slavery. And that took a long time. But Paul is speaking in advance. Why? Because Paul is speaking on behalf of God. He's speaking on behalf of God's Son, the Word made flesh, Jesus. And he's telling us nobody is less than anybody else. We're all brothers and sisters. And it's a challenge to live that way. You know as well as I do. Read the papers, look at the Twitters, watch the feeds on internet. Even the leaders are not respectful of all people. It's them and us, whoever they are. But there's always, I shouldn't say always, so often in our society, the animosity to do bad, to will the destruction of people, not to raise up and love people. And Jesus makes it very clear, you want to follow me, you got to be my follower and carry the cross that has your name on it. And this doesn't mean crucifixion necessarily, although Jesus was going toward his crucifixion in this point in the gospel. In the days of someone we all know and love, St. Francis of Assisi, there was a image that he propagated. It was the image of what looks like a T, a tau, they called it, T-A-U. And sometimes you'll see pictures of Francis with the tau on him. And very often the Franciscans wear that cross. It's a cross that signifies the tau, and when the phrases in Scripture wrote out the cross, that tau was part of it. And when the Franciscans took that tau as their symbol, it meant what we'd say is A to Z, because tau is the last letter of the alphabet in Hebrew, and the A is, I don't know what you call it. And that symbol for Francis and the Franciscans would signify everything, A to Z. So when we're following Jesus, as the Franciscans now, we follow him A to Z. We follow him to the tau. We follow him to the cross. Completely, metaphorically. I'm breaking down the metaphor. We follow him completely. So if my spouse, father, mother, even dog keeps me away from doing good, keeps me away from imitating our faith that we have in Jesus Christ, shun them. Keep away. Because they're evil influence. And what we say is a near occasion of sin. So Jesus knows what he's saying when he gives us this very extreme gospel today. He knows what he's saying. He says, my Father made all of us. And my Father made all of us equal. And my Father loves all of us. And you, my followers, must do the same. A to Z, in all aspects of your life. And following Jesus means giving all we have. Not necessarily all the money we have, but our hearts. And work every day, as the metaphor of building the tower indicates, work every day toward the conclusion, unity with God. Not once a week here in church, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every day. The color and texture and behavior of our lives should all contribute to the cross, all contribute to A to Z, all contribute to a full commission and reaction to Jesus. Not partially. Sometimes we say, I dropped $1 in the basket, that's enough for today. And we're not talking about the number. I did my deed. So I can be okay until next week. No, Jesus is saying something. No. Every day, you must give of yourself. Sometimes money, sometimes charity, sometimes patience, sometimes time with someone who needs it. In one of the religious ed classes, there's a story that the teacher said to the kids, now, if you had $1 million, would you give something to the poor? Every hand went up. And then she went down the line. If you had $500, would you give something to the poor? Every hand went up. And then she hit 20, same thing. Then she hit 1. She said, how about if you had $1, would you give everything to the poor? And every hand but 1 went up. And the teacher said to little Joey, why is your hand not up? Because I don't have $1 million, but I do have $1, and I ain't giving that up. And that's what Jesus wants. He wants us to the end. Again, we're not talking about money. That's his metaphor. We're talking about our faith, our soul, our action, and our love. Give it all. Question is, to whom?